Do you ever think about those Christmas morning moments from the 1980s? The ones so funny and familiar they still make you smile today? Back then, those chaotic holiday mornings shaped our childhood memories with traditions, mischief, and laughter nobody planned. So what made those early hours feel like pure magic wrapped in absolute mayhem? Waiting until an acceptable hour to wake your parents was one of the most agonizing tests of patience any child in the 1980s ever faced. You would lie in bed, wide awake since 4 in the morning, staring at the ceiling and wondering if time itself had stopped just to torture you. Every creak of the house sounded like permission to finally move, and every glow from the hallway felt like a signal that maybe, just maybe, someone else was awake too. But the rule was clear in most homes, spoken or unspoken, and nobody dared cross that invisible line before 6 or 7 o'clock. So you counted ceiling tiles, whispered to siblings sharing the same agony, and pressed your ear against the door, hoping to hear footsteps that meant it was finally time. Some kids crept down the hallway and sat at the top of the stairs, peering toward the glow of the Christmas tree, torturing themselves with glimpses of wrapped presents they could not yet touch. The clock moved slower on Christmas morning than any other day of the year, and the wait felt like something designed by adults purely for entertainment. When that magic hour finally arrived, the stampede that followed shook the entire house awake. The elaborate fake sleep performance when parents checked on you was an Oscar-worthy act every 80s kid perfected without a single rehearsal. You heard the bedroom door creak open, felt the hallway light spill across your blanket, and immediately went completely still. Your breathing became slow, exaggerated, almost cartoonishly relaxed, even though your heart was pounding so hard you were sure they could hear it from the doorway. Some kids added a light snore, a gentle sigh, or a dramatic roll to really sell the illusion. The goal was simple: convince them you were sound asleep so they would go back to bed and eventually allow the morning madness to begin. Parents, of course, knew exactly what was happening. They had done the same thing decades earlier, standing in the same doorways, pulling the same tricks on their own parents. But everyone played along, honoring the unspoken tradition of pretending that children could actually sleep on Christmas Eve. When the door finally closed and you heard their footsteps retreat, you exhaled like you had just survived a spy mission, then went right back to staring at the ceiling, waiting for dawn. Fighting over who got to hand out the presents was one of the fiercest battles of Christmas morning, and every 80s kid understood the stakes involved. The person who controlled the present pile had ultimate power, deciding the order, the pacing, and the level of suspense everyone else had to endure. Some families rotated the honor each year, while others let the youngest take charge, but that did not stop siblings from lobbying hard the moment their feet hit the living room floor. The chosen one would kneel beside the tree like a tiny monarch, reading names aloud with exaggerated importance, sometimes holding a gift just long enough to drive everyone crazy. Of course, accusations of favoritism flew constantly, with someone always claiming the distributor gave themselves the biggest boxes first or handed out the boring gifts to rivals while saving the good ones. Parents tried to keep the peace, but honestly, they were just as eager to see what was inside each package. The present hander held the rhythm of the entire morning, and that small responsibility felt enormous when you were 7 years old and surrounded by wrapping paper chaos. The desperate search for batteries on Christmas morning was one of the most devastating plot twists any 80s kid could experience. You tore open a package, gazed upon the toy you had dreamed about for months, and then saw the cruelest words ever printed on cardboard: "Batteries not included." Suddenly, the excitement drained away as parents scrambled through junk drawers, flashlight cases, and old remote controls looking for something that would bring your new treasure to life. Sometimes the batteries existed but were the wrong size, and you stood there holding a useless device while Dad tried to explain why a AA was not the same as a AAA, or why a C battery would never fit where a D belonged. Other times, the family car had to be raided, or worse, a trip to the only open gas station became the dramatic intermission nobody wanted. Kids whose toys worked immediately strutted around the living room like conquering heroes while the rest of us waited in battery purgatory, hoping someone would find that magical pack hiding in a kitchen cabinet somewhere behind the expired coupons. It was a universal childhood trauma wrapped in holiday packaging. Ripping through wrapping paper like a tornado was the only acceptable method for opening presents in the 1980s, and no one had time for patience or delicacy. The moment a gift landed in your hands, your fingers found the first available edge and tore with the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for wild animals discovering prey after a long winter. Sheets of paper flew across the living room, boughs launched into the air, and ribbons wrapped around wrists like trophies of destruction. Parents sometimes tried to slow things down, asking kids to wait so they could snap a photograph or see what everyone received. But those requests rarely survived contact with actual children holding unopened presents. The floor disappeared beneath layers of shredded wrapping and boxes piled up faster than anyone could track. Some families had one child who carefully peeled tape and folded paper for reuse, but that kid was usually treated like an alien visitor from a planet with no Christmas spirit whatsoever. The rest of us understood the assignment clearly: maximum speed, maximum chaos, and absolutely no regard for the craftsmanship of the wrapping job. The disappointed stare at clothing gifts was an expression every 80s kid perfected, usually while holding a sweater, socks, or something equally tragic. You felt the soft fabric through the wrapping paper and knew immediately this was not the action figure, video game, or toy you requested. But the real test came when you had to look up, meet the eyes of the gift giver, and summon enthusiasm from somewhere deep in your soul. Grandparents especially loved giving clothes, and they watched your face with such hopeful anticipation that faking joy became a moral obligation. You held the sweater up, stretched it wide like you were genuinely impressed, and said something like, "It is so nice," or "Thank you so much," while silently mourning the toys you would never receive. Parents coached you beforehand about being grateful no matter what, which helped but never fully prepared you for the emotional whiplash of thinking you were about to unwrap something amazing, only to discover underwear. The good news was that clothing gifts eventually became useful, but on Christmas morning, they felt like coal wrapped in cheerful paper. Taking turns opening gifts one at a time was a rule every 80s family established, and absolutely nobody followed for more than 3 presents. Parents loved the idea because it let everyone appreciate each gift, share the moment, and create memories together. Kids heard this rule and nodded politely, then immediately forgot it existed the second wrapping paper started flying. What usually happened was a chaotic free-for-all where multiple people ripped into packages simultaneously while someone yelled about waiting your turn and nobody listened. Some families had elaborate systems involving youngest to oldest, round-robin rotations or drawn numbers, but all of these collapsed under the weight of childhood impatience. The only time turn-taking actually worked was when a parent physically held the remaining presents hostage, refusing to distribute another until the previous one was properly acknowledged. Even then, kids fidgeted, whined, and stretched their arms toward the tree like they might spontaneously combust without another gift to open. By the end of most Christmas mornings, the rule was completely abandoned, and everyone agreed to pretend it never existed in the first place. Sitting on the floor in your brand new Christmas pajamas was the official uniform of holiday morning in the 1980s, and nothing else felt quite right. Many families had a tradition of opening one gift on Christmas Eve, and that gift was almost always pajamas specifically designed for the next morning's festivities. You woke up already dressed for the occasion, padding down the hallway in flannel, fleece, or something covered in candy canes and snowflakes. The fabric was fresh, the elastic was snug, and the whole outfit smelled like that particular scent of brand new clothing still holding on to traces of the store. Sitting cross-legged beside the tree, surrounded by wrapping paper and siblings in matching outfits, felt like being part of something perfectly choreographed, even though nothing was planned at all. Photographs from those mornings always show kids drowning in slightly too big pajamas, grinning at the camera with bed hair and pure joy. The pajamas usually lasted through breakfast, lunch, and sometimes the entire day because nobody wanted to break the spell by putting on regular clothes. The Christmas morning photo setup that took forever was one of those rituals that felt endless when you were a kid, desperate to play with new toys. Dad would fumble with the camera, checking the flash cube, adjusting the lens, and asking everyone to hold still for just one more second while the moment stretched into eternity. You stood beside the tree holding your best present, frozen in a pose that grew more awkward with each passing minute, smiling so hard your cheeks ached. Siblings jostled for position, someone always blinked at the wrong moment, and the flash often fired before everyone was ready or failed to fire at all. Parents wanted documentation of the chaos, proof that the magic happened, something to paste into albums and show relatives later. Kids just wanted the ordeal to end so they could tear into their new toys without supervision. The resulting photographs captured a strange mixture of genuine excitement and barely concealed impatience, frozen forever on film that would take a week to develop. Looking back now, those pictures are treasures, but in the moment, they felt like hostage negotiations conducted by people holding cameras. Trying to assemble toys before reading the instructions was a rite of passage every 80s kid attempted, usually with disastrous results. The box promised excitement. The pieces spilled across the carpet like a puzzle meant to defeat you, and confidence surged through your veins as you grabbed parts and started connecting things that looked like they belonged together. For about 3 minutes, everything seemed fine. Then came the realization that something was upside down, backwards, or missing entirely, and suddenly the project stalled. Parents watched from across the room, waiting for the inevitable request for help, sometimes offering gentle suggestions that were immediately ignored. The instruction sheet sat nearby, untouched, mocking you with its numbered diagrams and simple explanations that pride refused to acknowledge. Eventually, after enough frustration, the manual became necessary, and the assembly restarted with guidance. Some toys took hours to build correctly, while others remained forever slightly wrong because nobody wanted to admit they needed to take it apart and try again. The lesson repeated every Christmas, and every Christmas it was forgotten by the next toy. Hoarding all your candy and treats in your bedroom was a survival instinct every 80s kid developed the moment the stocking was emptied. You gathered chocolate Santas, candy canes, peppermint bark, and every sugary treasure into a pile that looked like a dragon's hoard from a fantasy novel. The bedroom became a vault, and siblings became the enemy who could not be trusted under any circumstances. You hid the best pieces under your pillow, inside drawers, or behind books on the shelf where nobody would think to look. The goal was simple. Make sure your supply lasted longer than everyone else's, even if that meant rationing one piece per day while your brother ate his entire stash before lunch. Parents occasionally tried to confiscate candy for safety or fairness reasons, but most kids developed early negotiation skills to protect their stockpile. You learned which treats could be eaten quietly without wrappers crinkling and which ones had to wait until nobody was paying attention. That pile of Christmas candy represented something bigger than sugar. It represented victory, strategy, and the sweet taste of outsmarting everyone else in the house. Wearing your new clothes immediately with tags still on was the fashion show nobody asked for, but everyone participated in anyway. The moment you unwrapped a new outfit, jacket, or pair of sneakers, you stripped off whatever you were wearing and put the gift on right there in the living room chaos. Tags dangled from sleeves, size stickers clung to pant legs, and price labels sometimes flapped in plain view, but none of that mattered in the slightest. You wanted to feel new, to see yourself transformed, to show everyone exactly what you looked like in this gift that was finally yours. Parents occasionally protested, insisting clothes needed washing first or that tags should be removed before wearing, but their voices were drowned out by children spinning in circles to show off their new look. Some kids wore 3 or 4 outfits layered on top of each other, refusing to choose just one favorite. By the end of the morning, the living room floor was littered with discarded pajamas, old socks, and enough tags to fill a small trash bag, while kids paraded around in mismatched combinations that somehow felt absolutely perfect. Fighting over the television to try out new video games was one of the great Christmas morning battles of the 1980s, especially in homes with only one set that worked with the Atari, Intellivision, or Nintendo. The kid who unwrapped a new game cartridge immediately claimed priority, but so did every other sibling holding a controller or cassette of their own. Negotiations happened fast, promises were made and broken, and alliances formed only to collapse the moment someone's turn lasted too long. Parents tried to establish time limits, but those rules dissolved the instant someone reached a high score or unlocked a new level. They refused to pause. The television became the center of the household, surrounded by children sitting cross-legged on the carpet, eyes locked on flickering pixels, thumbs mashing buttons in a rhythm only they understood. Some families solved the conflict by forcing players to rotate after each game, while others surrendered entirely and let the strongest negotiator dominate the screen. Either way, that one television held more power on Christmas morning than anything else in the house. Calling relatives on the one kitchen phone to say thanks was a ritual every 80s kid dreaded but could not escape no matter how hard they tried. The phone hung on the wall or sat on the counter with its impossibly long curly cord, and parents would hand it over with a look that meant you had absolutely no choice in the matter. You stood there, receiver pressed to your ear, reciting lines you barely remembered while Grandma or Aunt Carol asked questions about gifts you had already forgotten opening. The cord twisted around your arm as you shifted from foot to foot, desperate to get back to your toys, your candy, your new video game waiting in the living room calling your name. Meanwhile, siblings watched and smirked from across the room, knowing their turn was coming next and enjoying your suffering. Some relatives kept you on the line for what felt like hours, asking about school, your friends, your plans for the new year, while Christmas morning slipped away 1 minute at a time. The only escape was handing the phone to the next victim and sprinting back to freedom before anyone could call you back for more polite conversation. Comparing gifts with your siblings to see who won Christmas was the unofficial competition nobody admitted, but everyone played with deadly seriousness in every 80s household. You counted presents, measured sizes, estimated values, and calculated the total worth of your haul against theirs using math skills you never bothered showing in school. A sibling with one more box automatically seemed favored, even if that box contained socks while yours held a brand new toy everyone actually wanted. Arguments broke out over who got the better version, the cooler color, or the thing that was actually on their list versus a random substitute nobody asked for. Parents insisted Christmas was not a competition, but those words meant nothing to kids surrounded by wrapping paper and mental spreadsheets of grievances. Some siblings gloated openly, parading their best gifts around the living room, while others sulked in corners convinced they had been cheated by Santa himself. By the end of the day, most rivalries faded as everyone got absorbed in their own toys. But for those first few hours, the scoreboard mattered more than holiday spirit ever could. The giant pile of wrapping paper and box chaos was one of the most glorious messes any 80s living room ever experienced during the holiday season. Within an hour of present opening, the floor completely disappeared beneath mountains of shredded paper, crushed boughs, tangled ribbons, and cardboard boxes stacked like a city skyline. Kids tunneled through the debris, built forts out of empty packaging, and occasionally lost small toy parts in the avalanche of holiday destruction that nobody could have predicted. Parents surveyed the damage with a mixture of exhaustion and resignation, knowing cleanup would take longer than the unwrapping itself. Trash bags appeared, but filling them felt impossible because new layers of chaos kept surfacing beneath the ones you thought you cleared. Some families discovered missing gifts hours later, buried under paper nobody had noticed or thought to check. Others found shoes, remote controls, or the family pet hiding somewhere in the wreckage. The mess became part of the memory, a visual reminder that Christmas morning was not about neatness or order, but about joyful destruction. Eating Christmas cookies and candy for breakfast was one of those magical rule suspensions that made the holiday morning feel like an alternate universe where parents temporarily forgot everything they knew about nutrition and healthy eating. You grabbed a handful of chocolate from your stocking, bit the head off a gingerbread man, and washed it down with eggnog or hot cocoa while sitting on the floor surrounded by wrapping paper. Nobody mentioned vegetables, protein, or balanced meals. The usual breakfast rules evaporated like snow on a warm sidewalk, replaced by a glorious free-for-all where sugar was the only food group that mattered. Parents were too busy assembling toys, taking photographs, or recovering from their own late-night wrapping sessions to enforce normal standards. Some kids tested the limits, eating candy until their stomachs protested and their energy levels spiked into chaos. Others paced themselves, savoring each treat like a small victory against the tyranny of everyday nutrition. Either way, that sugar-fueled breakfast became one of the most treasured traditions of the entire holiday season. Parents falling asleep on the couch by noon was one of the most predictable scenes of every 80s Christmas morning, and kids learned to recognize it coming. They had stayed up late assembling bicycles, wrapping last-minute gifts, and arranging presents beneath the tree with precision that would never be appreciated by anyone. They woke before dawn to children stampeding down hallways, then spent hours smiling through the chaos, snapping photographs, and pretending they were not completely exhausted. By the time the living room floor was buried in wrapping paper and the kids had scattered to play with their new toys, Mom and Dad simply collapsed. The couch became a recovery zone, a place where adults closed their eyes for just a minute and woke up 2 hours later wondering what year it was. Kids learned to tiptoe past, understanding instinctively that waking a sleeping parent on Christmas meant risking the fragile peace of the entire household. Some families had both parents unconscious simultaneously, leaving children to govern themselves in a temporary holiday anarchy that felt like the greatest gift of all. Taking all your toys to your room like a protective dragon was the natural response to a morning filled with siblings, chaos, and the constant threat of someone touching your stuff without asking permission. The moment you finished unwrapping, you gathered everything into your arms and retreated to the safety of your bedroom, where doors could close and territories could be defended against all intruders. You arranged your new possessions on the bed, the floor, the desk, anywhere they could be admired without interference from brothers, sisters, or curious parents asking if you wanted to share. The room became a fortress, a private museum of Christmas morning glory where every item had its place and every visitor needed permission to enter. Siblings occasionally tried to breach the defenses, offering trades or demanding turns, but the dragon guarding the hoard rarely negotiated on the first day. That instinct to protect, to possess, to claim ownership over gifts that were finally and completely yours felt as natural as breathing, and it lasted until exhaustion finally forced everyone to surrender to sleep. The one gift hidden behind the tree you almost missed was the plot twist that turned a good Christmas morning into an unforgettable one that would be talked about for years. Just when you thought the presents were finished and the wrapping paper had finally settled, someone noticed a box tucked behind the stand, half buried under the tree skirt, or wedged between branches where nobody thought to look. The whole family gathered around as the forgotten gift was pulled into the light, and suddenly the excitement of the morning came rushing back like a second wave of holiday magic that nobody expected. Sometimes it was a big present hidden intentionally by parents who wanted to save the best for last and create a memorable moment. Other times it was genuinely overlooked in the chaos of early morning unwrapping and frantic paper tearing. Either way, that hidden gift felt like bonus Christmas, like Santa had left a secret package just for you. The discovery turned ordinary endings into something truly special, proving that even when you thought the magic was over, there might still be one more surprise waiting in the shadows beneath the tree. Pretending to love a gift you actually hated was an Oscar-worthy performance every 80s kid mastered by the age of 7, sometimes even earlier. You unwrapped something that made your stomach sink, maybe a board game nobody wanted, a shirt 2 sizes too big, or a toy clearly meant for someone much younger, and somehow you had to react like it was exactly what you dreamed about. Your face had to light up, your voice had to carry enthusiasm, and your thank you had to sound sincere enough to fool the hopeful relative watching your every move. Some kids became so skilled at this act that they fooled everyone in the room, including themselves for a brief moment. The real challenge came later when that same relative asked if you had been enjoying the gift, forcing you to invent stories about how much fun you were having with something still sitting untouched in a closet. Parents recognized the performance because they had done the same thing decades earlier, and sometimes they exchanged knowing glances while you smiled through the disappointment. It was a survival skill disguised as gratitude, and every kid who lived through those mornings understood exactly how it worked. Stepping on a Lego piece or small toy part barefoot was the sharp reminder that Christmas joy came with hazards nobody warned you about in advance. The living room floor transformed into a minefield of colorful plastic bricks, tiny wheels, connector pegs, and sharp-edged accessories scattered during the chaos of unwrapping and assembly. You would be walking toward the kitchen for another cookie, completely unaware of the danger lurking beneath discarded wrapping paper, when suddenly your bare foot found the one piece guaranteed to cause maximum pain. The yelp that followed echoed through the house, and siblings looked up briefly before returning to their own toys without sympathy or concern. Parents offered a quick sorry, but kept assembling whatever complicated gift demanded their attention at that moment. The pain faded quickly, but the lesson stuck around. Never walk barefoot on Christmas morning unless you wanted to experience a sensation similar to stepping on a tiny plastic sword designed by someone who hated feet. That first sharp stab became part of the holiday memory, as inevitable as wrapping paper chaos and cookie crumbs on the carpet. The VCR setup that took all morning was one of those Christmas traditions that tested every father's patience while the rest of the family waited and watched with growing impatience. Someone unwrapped a new movie, maybe a Disney classic or a holiday special recorded from television, and suddenly the entire household needed the VCR to work immediately. But the machine had other plans entirely. Cables tangled behind the entertainment center, the tracking refused to cooperate, and the remote control demanded batteries that were already powering something else across the room. Dad crouched behind the television with a flashlight, muttering about connections and inputs while kids bounced impatiently nearby, asking if it was ready yet. Some families spent hours switching channels, adjusting knobs, and rewinding test tapes before the picture finally cleared enough to watch. By the time everything worked, half the morning had vanished and parents collapsed into chairs, wondering why technology promised convenience but delivered frustration instead. Still, when that movie finally played without static lines or warped audio, the wait somehow felt worth it. Waiting for Dad to finish setting up the train set was an exercise in patience that could stretch Christmas morning into what felt like Christmas afternoon. The box promised a magical miniature world of locomotives, tracks, and tiny buildings, but assembling it required skills, time, and a tolerance for frustration that most children simply did not possess. Dad would spread pieces across the carpet, consult instructions that seemed written in a foreign language, and attempt to connect track sections that refused to snap together properly. Kids hovered nearby, offering suggestions that were politely ignored, asking every few minutes if it was ready yet. Some train sets took hours to complete, with derailments, electrical issues, and missing parts turning a simple toy into a full construction project. By the time the locomotive finally circled the tree without jumping the rails, everyone cheered like they had witnessed a miracle of engineering. The train became the centerpiece of Christmas morning, chugging along while exhausted fathers finally sat down, and children who had waited so long watched with the kind of appreciation only delayed gratification could create. The post-present cleanup nobody wanted to help with was the final chapter of every 80s Christmas morning, and it arrived with the inevitability of a Monday after vacation. The living room lay buried under mountains of wrapping paper, cardboard boxes, twist ties, plastic packaging, and instruction manuals nobody planned to read. Parents surveyed the destruction and announced it was time to clean, which somehow translated into children suddenly needing to use the bathroom, check on their toys, or disappear into bedrooms for urgent and mysterious reasons. The few kids who stayed found themselves holding trash bags while parents pointed at pile after pile of holiday debris. Some families turned cleanup into a game, racing to fill bags fastest, while others simply accepted the chaos would take all afternoon to contain. By the time the floor finally reappeared, everyone was exhausted, slightly cranky, and ready to collapse with their new toys in quiet corners of the house. The mess was part of the memory, proof that something wonderful had happened even if nobody wanted to be the one sweeping up glitter and ribbon scraps. Lead tinsel icicle strands were the most dazzling addition to any Christmas tree in the 1980s, catching every flicker of light and sending it shimmering across the living room in waves of silver glory. Families draped them over branches with abandon, creating that cascading waterfall effect that made even modest trees look like holiday catalog photos. Kids loved running their fingers through the cool metallic strands, watching them sway as tree lights blinked behind them. Nobody questioned what made them so beautifully heavy, so smooth compared to cheaper plastic versions that curled and tangled. The answer was lead, a toxic metal woven directly into the strands that made them hang perfectly straight. Every time someone adjusted the tinsel, particles drifted into the air, settling onto carpets, furniture, and the hands of children who could not resist touching them. When researchers connected lead tinsel to health concerns, especially for young children who put everything in their mouths, regulators moved swiftly. The shimmer that once defined Christmas mornings became a symbol of hidden danger inside innocent traditions. Placing real oranges and walnuts inside stockings was a tradition that connected 1970s children to generations who came before them, even if they did not fully understand why. Grandparents spoke of times when fresh fruit in winter was a genuine luxury, something rare enough to feel like a gift rather than a grocery item. Parents carried the tradition forward, tucking bright oranges into the toe of each stocking and scattering walnuts throughout the folds. Children woke on Christmas morning and felt the weight of something round at the very bottom, often pulling it out with confusion before realizing it was fruit, not a toy. The orange smelled incredible, sweet and sharp against the cold morning air, and the walnuts required effort to crack, turning breakfast into a small adventure. The tradition was simple, affordable, and carried meaning deeper than any store-bought item. It reminded families that Christmas was once about abundance in small forms, about gratitude for what the season provided. Today, stockings overflow with plastic trinkets, but the memory of peeling that first Christmas orange lingers for anyone lucky enough to have experienced it. Community bonfires using unregulated materials were another festive tradition that belonged to a different world entirely. You would see families tossing in scraps of old fencing, broken furniture, untreated wood, and sometimes even boxes or paper left over from the holiday madness. The bonfire would roar to life, sending sparks spiraling into the winter air like fireflies trying to escape the heat. People gathered around with warm drinks, shared stories, and treated it as a way to come together when the weather tried to push everyone apart. Nobody checked whether the materials were safe to burn. Nobody asked about air quality. It was simply a tradition born from practicality and a desire to be together. Today, though, burning anything other than clean, approved wood is illegal. Environmental regulations forbid the release of toxic fumes, and burning household materials can result in fines or even legal action. It is a reminder that the world has grown more cautious and more regulated. But the memory of standing around a roaring fire, bundled up and laughing with neighbors, is something no law can erase. Lead-soldered stained glass tree toppers crowned Christmas trees in the 1980s with handcrafted elegance that mass-produced plastic stars could never match. Families treasured these delicate pieces, often receiving them as wedding gifts or inheriting them from grandparents who valued artisan craftsmanship. The colored glass caught tree lights beautifully, casting rainbow patterns across ceilings and walls while everyone gathered below to exchange presents. What made these toppers so structurally sound was the lead solder holding each piece of glass together, applied by craftspeople who worked without gloves or ventilation. Every time someone placed the topper on the tree, adjusted its position, or packed it away, tiny particles of lead transferred onto hands that later touched faces and food. Children lifted onto shoulders to place the star were exposed directly, their small fingers gripping the metal seams without anyone imagining the danger. When health authorities documented lead's devastating effects on developing brains, these handcrafted treasures became hazardous heirlooms. The artistry that once elevated holiday decorating now carries warnings about handling and display. Building nativity scenes with hand-painted ceramic figures was a December ritual that transformed coffee tables, mantels, and windowsills into sacred little worlds. Families unwrapped each piece carefully, setting Mary and Joseph in place first, then adding shepherds, wise men, and animals one by one as the days counted down to Christmas. The figures were often chipped from years of handling, their paint faded in spots that only made them feel more beloved. Some sets had been passed down through generations, arriving in boxes lined with tissue paper that smelled like old storage and quiet reverence. Children loved arranging the animals, debating where the donkey should stand or whether the sheep looked better near the manger. The baby Jesus figure was always saved for last, placed in the tiny cradle only on Christmas Eve as a way of marking the moment the celebration truly began. These scenes were not just decorations, they were stories told in miniature, lessons about patience and the meaning behind the holiday rush. The ritual of setting them up year after year created memories no store-bought perfection could ever match, grounding Christmas in something older than tinsel or wrapping paper. PVC blow-mold yard figures with toxic plasticizers stood proudly on lawns throughout the 1980s, their cheerful Santas and snowmen glowing from internal bulbs that made neighborhoods feel magical after dark. Families collected them over years, adding new figures each season until entire yards became illuminated winter wonderlands. Children loved running between them, touching their smooth plastic surfaces and peering inside at the warm orange glow of incandescent bulbs. These figures were made from polyvinyl chloride softened with plasticizers that made the material flexible enough to mold into complex shapes. Under summer storage heat and winter bulb warmth, those plasticizers slowly migrated to the surface and released fumes that drifted across yards where families gathered. The chemicals responsible for making the plastic pliable were later linked to hormone disruption, especially troubling for children who spent hours playing near the glowing figures. When regulations tightened around these compounds, manufacturers scrambled to reformulate. The beloved yard decorations that defined neighborhood holiday spirit became symbols of an era that prioritized appearance over safety. Unventilated indoor Christmas tree flocking was something that families approached with excitement instead of fear. In the 1970s, grabbing a can of artificial snow and coating the tree right in the middle of the living room felt like the best way to turn your home into a snowy postcard scene. Kids would gather around just to watch the powder fall onto the branches, building up that soft, white layer that made everything feel instantly festive. The smell, the sound, the little cloud that puffed up with every spray all felt like part of the fun. No one opened windows or wore masks or worried about what they were breathing in. The chemicals were just part of the magic, even if nobody knew it then. Today, though, this is the kind of thing that would get you in trouble faster than you could shake the can. Safety codes require ventilation, protective gear, or outright ban certain types of flocking materials. People talk about air quality and respiratory risks and things that were not even part of the vocabulary in the 1970s. Maybe it is for the best, but it is impossible to deny that the old way felt more enchanting. When you see old photos covered in that soft, snowy coating, you can almost smell the faint sweetness of the artificial snow and remember how proud everyone was of the winter scene they had created indoors. Serving homemade fruitcake to guests was a Christmas tradition that divided families and neighborhoods into passionate camps of lovers and skeptics. Grandmothers spent weeks soaking dried fruits in rum or brandy, folding them into dense batter, and baking loaves that could double as doorstops if left unattended too long. The cakes arrived at gatherings wrapped in cloth and tied with ribbon, presented with pride that demanded at least a polite taste from everyone. Some people genuinely loved the intense sweetness, the chewy fruit, and the boozy warmth that spread through each bite. Others quietly pushed their slices around, waiting for the right moment to hide them beneath a napkin. The fruitcake became a symbol of effort, a way of saying someone spent real time preparing something special. Recipes were guarded like family secrets, passed down through generations. Regifting fruitcake became a quiet tradition of its own, with some cakes traveling from house to house for years. Today, fruitcake has faded into the background, replaced by lighter desserts. But for those who loved them, and even those who only pretended to, fruitcake remains a reminder of an era when effort mattered more than convenience. Cutting down a Christmas tree from public land was one of those bold, adventurous family outings that made the holidays feel like something out of a classic American story. Parents would pack everyone into the car, drive out to a wooded area or a quiet clearing, and pick the perfect tree with nothing but excitement guiding them. Kids loved the idea of choosing a tree that nobody else had touched, one that looked wild and authentic and worthy of being the centerpiece of the living room. The crunch of snow, the cold air, and the thrill of the hunt made the whole day unforgettable. Back then, few people worried about permits or restrictions, especially in rural areas where land boundaries blurred and tradition spoke louder than rules. Today, though, cutting a tree from public land without permission is a criminal offense. Forestry regulations protect natural habitats, and conservation laws control how many trees can be removed each season. The adventure that once felt wholesome and free now comes with fines, penalties, and sometimes even court involvement. It shows just how much the world has changed. What families once saw as bonding time in nature is now something you need paperwork to do. But the memories remain as crisp as the winter air that once filled those stolen forests. Aluminum icicles with sharp, unfinished edges dangled from trees in the 1980s like frozen rain caught mid-fall, their metallic surfaces reflecting every color from surrounding lights. Families bought them in bulk, tossing handfuls onto branches until trees sparkled with that retro shimmer that felt quintessentially festive. Kids loved helping, grabbing fistfuls of thin metal strips and draping them anywhere they could reach. But these icicles were manufactured cheaply, stamped from aluminum sheets and packaged without any smoothing process. The edges remained razor-sharp, capable of slicing fingers with even gentle handling. Children often discovered this painfully, ending up with cuts that parents dismissed as minor holiday hazards. Beyond the cuts, these metal icicles conducted electricity if they fell across light strands or touched exposed wiring, creating shock risks nobody anticipated from simple decorations. When safety advocates documented injuries and electrical dangers, regulations required edge finishing or discontinuation. The sparkling icicles that once seemed like harmless festive additions became symbols of an era when safety standards lagged behind holiday enthusiasm. Hanging homemade stockings knitted by Grandma was a tradition that made each child feel uniquely loved in ways no store-bought stocking could match. These were not perfect, machine-stitched creations with flawless lettering, but handmade works featuring crooked names, uneven stitches, and color combinations only a grandmother would choose. Every family member had their own, personalized down to the smallest detail, and the stockings grew more treasured each year. Children learned early that their stocking was special because someone spent hours creating it, counting stitches by lamplight. The wool smelled faintly of the closet where it was stored 11 months of the year, and pulling it out each December felt like reuniting with an old friend. Some stockings had patches where holes had been mended, evidence of years beside fireplaces. Grandmothers who made them often did not live forever, and when they passed, those stockings became irreplaceable heirlooms. Families hung them long after the original recipients grew up, passing them to new generations who heard stories about the woman who made them. Today, mass-produced stockings dominate, but anyone who owns a handmade one knows it carries meaning money cannot buy. Glass ornament string lights that overheated were practically the heartbeat of Christmas decor in the 1970s. When you plugged them in, the whole house lit up with colors that felt warm, deep, and slightly dramatic, something modern LED lights never quite managed to recreate. The bulbs were thick and glossy, the kind you could tap lightly and hear a tiny clink as if they were miniature ornaments in their own right. Every family had at least one set, sometimes passed down from older relatives who swore by their glow. Of course, those bulbs burned hot enough to toast your fingers if you held them too long, but that was part of the charm. You learned to respect them the same way you respected stovetops or ovens. Today, though, anything that overheats even slightly is pulled off the shelves before it ever reaches a living room. Modern electrical codes ban lights with certain wiring thickness and heat output, and anything with a glass bulb is quietly pushed into the category of retro danger. But those lights had personality. They flickered softly, they hummed ever so slightly, and when one bulb went out, the entire string went dark, sending the family into a comedic treasure hunt to find the culprit. That memory stays warm in a way the lights never did. Playing Christmas records on the turntable was a ritual that turned the living room into a concert hall filled with warmth and crackling static. Families would pull out favorite albums each December, sliding the vinyl from its sleeve with care reserved for fragile heirlooms. The needle would drop, a soft hiss would fill the room, and suddenly Bing Crosby or Nat King Cole was singing as if stopping by personally to celebrate. Kids learned early how to handle records properly, balancing them on fingertips and placing them gently on the spinning platter. The ritual of flipping the record halfway through became part of the experience, a pause that gave everyone time to refill drinks or check on the roast. Scratches and skips added character to songs that had been played dozens of times, familiar imperfections that became part of the music. Parents sang along without embarrassment, and grandparents closed their eyes and drifted back to Christmases from their own childhood. Streaming replaced turntables with convenience, but something intangible was lost when the ritual disappeared. Those who grew up placing needles on vinyl still remember how playing a record made every carol feel like an event worth gathering for. Formaldehyde-treated artificial garlands were draped across mantels, staircases, and doorways in nearly every 1980s home, their lush green appearance lasting season after season without wilting. Families loved how realistic they looked compared to older plastic versions, and the convenience of never replacing them made the investment worthwhile. Parents wrapped them around banisters while children helped secure them with ribbons, everyone breathing in that faint chemical smell nobody questioned. The garlands held their shape because manufacturers treated them with formaldehyde, a preservative that slowly released invisible fumes throughout the holiday season. Every time someone walked past or adjusted a draped section, more chemical escaped into living spaces where families gathered. Children sleeping near decorated doorways breathed the vapors all night without anyone realizing the exposure was happening. When researchers connected formaldehyde off-gassing to respiratory irritation and long-term concerns, regulations forced manufacturers to find safer methods. The garlands that once seemed like smart investments became reminders of how convenience can mask invisible dangers. Sending handwritten Christmas cards to every relative was a December project that consumed entire evenings and filled kitchen tables with envelopes, stamps, and carefully chosen cards. Families kept address books thick with names, some crossed out and updated as people moved, tracking decades of relationships in penciled notes. Mothers often led the effort, but everyone was expected to sign their name or add a short message, turning each card into a tiny family portrait delivered through the mail. Choosing the right card for each person mattered, because a funny card for a serious aunt could spark quiet holiday drama. The process took weeks, with cards stacked in piles waiting for stamps, each representing a connection that might otherwise go unspoken all year. Receiving cards in return felt like a small victory, and many families displayed them on mantels or strings, turning their collection into a visible measure of their social world. There was pride in a mailbox full of envelopes during December. Email and social media slowly erased this tradition, replacing handwritten notes with digital messages that arrive and vanish without ever being held. Those who remember licking stamps know something irreplaceable was lost. Using asbestos-based fake snow for decor sounds unthinkable today, but in the 1970s it was still floating around in attics, storage boxes, and leftover holiday supplies from even earlier decades. Families sprinkled it across mantels, nativity scenes, and Christmas village displays without a hint of hesitation because it looked stunningly real. It clung beautifully, stayed in place, and made every surface look winter-kissed, even if the weather outside refused to cooperate. Most people never imagined that the soft white powder carried risks far beyond messiness. The word asbestos simply did not trigger panic yet, at least not in the way it does today. Back then, you were more focused on making your holiday decor look as magical as possible, especially if you were working on a budget and wanted your home to feel special. Today, possession or use of anything containing asbestos can bring legal trouble, health warnings, and removal orders. It is one of those dramatic shifts where science taught us something we wish we had known earlier. But when people look back at old photos, they do not remember the danger. They remember the tiny hillside of white powder beneath the ceramic houses, the shimmer on the mantle, and how perfectly it tied the whole scene together. Cadmium red painted wooden ornaments hung from Christmas trees across the country in the 1980s, their bright crimson finish adding that perfect pop of traditional holiday color. Families loved how the rich red shades stood out against green branches, catching light in ways that made even simple wooden shapes look festive. Craft stores sold them by the dozen, and parents often let children help paint additional ornaments at home using similar commercial paints without checking labels. The vivid red pigment that made these ornaments so appealing came from cadmium, a toxic heavy metal that created colors more brilliant than safer alternatives could achieve. Every time someone handled the ornaments, adjusted their placement, or brushed against them while reaching for presents, tiny particles of cadmium paint transferred onto skin. Children who put ornaments in their mouths or touched them and then ate cookies absorbed the metal directly. When researchers documented cadmium's dangers, including kidney damage and bone weakening, regulators banned its use in consumer products. The cheerful red that once symbolized Christmas spirit became a cautionary tale about hidden ingredients. Making paper chain countdowns to mark the days until Christmas was a craft project that turned December into a visual journey every child could follow. Families cut strips of red and green construction paper, looped them together with glue, and hung the chain somewhere prominent where everyone could watch it shrink as the holiday approached. Each morning, a child would tear off one link, feeling the chain grow lighter and Christmas grow closer with every satisfying rip. The countdown became a ritual, something to look forward to before breakfast, a tiny ceremony that made waiting feel active. Some families made chains long enough to stretch across rooms, while others kept them modest for the final week. Teachers assigned the project in classrooms, sending children home with colorful loops that parents hung beside the tree. There was something satisfying about watching progress happen one link at a time, knowing exactly how many days remained. Advent calendars with chocolates eventually replaced these chains, trading handmade effort for store-bought convenience. Anyone who remembers tearing off that final loop on Christmas Eve knows the anticipation carried magic no purchased calendar could replicate. Lighting fireworks for Christmas Eve or midnight mass was an unexpected but beloved holiday tradition in certain parts of the United States. The winter sky would crack open with bursts of color, echoing through neighborhoods that were otherwise quiet and peaceful. Families bundled up in coats, stood on porches, and watched sparks rain down like tiny stars falling just for them. It was loud, dramatic, and incredibly festive. No one thought much about permits or safety laws or whether fireworks were allowed during the winter season. For many, it was simply a way to make the holy night feel even more magical and exciting. Today, though, fireworks are heavily restricted, and setting them off without approval can lead to fines or even arrest. The sound that once meant celebration now signals a code violation. It is strange how quickly something joyful can shift into something forbidden. But memories of those nights still glow warmly in the hearts of people who lived through them, especially when the air gets cold and the world gets quiet enough to remind them of the past. Electric candle lights without thermal cutoffs sat proudly in windows throughout the 1980s, their warm glow signaling holiday cheer to every neighbor passing by. Families placed them on sills, plugged them in, and left them burning for hours, sometimes days, without considering the heat building inside plastic bases. The soft, flickering light looked peaceful and traditional, so nobody imagined these simple decorations could pose any real threat. But early electric candles lacked the automatic shutoff features that modern versions include as standard safety measures. The bulbs inside grew dangerously hot over time, and plastic housings were never designed to withstand sustained heat exposure. Curtains brushed against warm bases, wooden sills absorbed rising temperatures, and transformers worked overtime without any mechanism to interrupt the current. Fires started in homes where families assumed the candles were safe, often while everyone slept believing the glow was harmless. When fire investigators traced blazes back to these unregulated candles, mandatory safety standards finally arrived. The cozy window tradition came with risks families only understood after tragedy struck. Wrapping presents in newspaper comics was one of those clever shortcuts that turned thriftiness into something unexpectedly charming. Families saved the Sunday funnies for weeks leading up to Christmas, flattening the colorful pages and stacking them beside the tape and scissors. Kids loved unwrapping gifts wrapped in their favorite comic strips, pausing to read a panel before tearing through to the present inside. The paper was thin, crinkled easily, and sometimes tore in awkward places, but it had personality no department store roll could match. Parents appreciated how the comics stretched the holiday budget, turning free newsprint into festive packaging guests always noticed. Some families made it a tradition, refusing to use anything else and proudly displaying their colorful pile of mismatched presents. The ink sometimes smudged onto fingers, but nobody minded. There was something warm about seeing Snoopy or Garfield stretched across a box meant for someone you loved. As newspapers shrank and Sunday editions grew thinner, this tradition faded away. But the memory of unwrapping a gift and laughing at a comic strip before seeing what was inside remains a small, happy piece of Christmas past. Mercury glass ornament garlands were prized possessions in 1980s households, their antique silver finish lending elegance that modern ornaments could not match. Families inherited them from grandparents or discovered them in specialty shops, stringing the delicate spheres across mantels and tree branches where they caught light with an almost liquid shimmer. The vintage look was achieved through double-walled glass with a reflective coating sealed inside, creating that distinctive mirror-like glow that made everything sparkle. What most families never knew was that older versions contained actual mercury compounds in their reflective coating. If an ornament cracked, chipped, or shattered, the toxic metal could escape into the air or onto surfaces where children played. People handled these ornaments carefully because they were fragile, never realizing gentleness was also a matter of safety. When environmental regulations tightened around mercury products, these garlands became prohibited items that families were urged to dispose of through hazardous waste programs. The elegant shimmer that elevated holiday decor now represents a generation's unknowing exposure. Letting children knock on strangers' doors for caroling after dark was a treasured tradition in the 1970s. Kids bundled in scarves and mittens would walk from house to house, singing off-key, giggling between verses and soaking up every ounce of attention from the adults who stepped outside to listen. There was a quiet trust holding the whole neighborhood together, the kind that let parents breathe easy in ways that feel impossible today. Children felt like they belonged to every house on the block, not just their own. And the darkness never felt threatening, only exciting. Neighbors welcomed them with cookies, cocoa, or a few pennies dropped into mittened hands. It felt safe, wholesome, and deeply connected to the spirit of the season. No parent hovered. No one followed behind in a car. The neighborhood itself acted like a guardian, watching over the wandering chorus. Today, though, the world is far more cautious. Children knocking on doors unsupervised is discouraged or outright banned in many places due to safety concerns and privacy rules. What was once a simple way to spread cheer has become a complicated question of risk. But the memory of singing beneath porch lights, breath turning to mist in the winter air, never fades. Spray-on flocking with chlorinated solvents was the secret weapon for families who wanted their Christmas trees to look freshly dusted with mountain snow. In the 1980s, parents would shake aerosol cans and coat branches, windowsills, and wreaths with white foam that dried into that perfect powdery finish. The smell was sharp and chemical, filling rooms with fumes that lingered long after decorating was done. But nobody thought twice about breathing it in. Kids watched in awe as parents transformed greenery into frosted masterpieces, sometimes helping to spray corners their parents could not reach. The chlorinated solvents inside those cans were powerful enough to simulate snow perfectly, but they also released volatile compounds that accumulated in enclosed spaces throughout the holiday season. Families sat in living rooms surrounded by freshly flocked decorations, inhaling chemicals no one imagined could cause respiratory harm. When scientists connected indoor air quality problems to these sprays, manufacturers were forced to reformulate or discontinue. The ease of creating instant winter magic came with a price nobody saw until damage was done. Letting kids sit on Santa's lap without background checks for performers was as normal as candy canes in the 1970s. Every mall, store, and community center had a Santa who showed up for a few weeks each year, ready to greet every child with a warm laugh and a holiday smile. Parents lined up without a second thought, snapping photos as their kids clutched Santa's coat and whispered their wishes for Christmas morning. People believed deeply in the goodness of the role, not the resume behind it. Santa was seen as a symbol of kindness, not a figure who needed screening or verification. Trust was the wrapping paper that held the whole tradition together. No one asked about training or screening or documentation. It was simply assumed that Santa was safe. The world trusted the suit, the beard, and the magic behind the role. Today, though, every performer must be vetted, monitored, and cleared under strict regulations. The innocence of the moment is now wrapped in paperwork and policies. Maybe it is necessary, but it also reminds us of a time when trust came easier and magic needed no signatures. If these Christmas morning moments brought back memories, share your funniest story in the comments. Tap like to keep the nostalgia alive and subscribe so you never miss another trip back to the 80s.